The greatest battle in the spiritual life is often not against external circumstances, but against the desire to remain in control. Human beings naturally want certainty. They want to know what tomorrow holds, how problems will be solved, and whether their plans will succeed. There is something within us that constantly reaches for the steering wheel, convinced that if we can just control enough variables, we can secure peace, happiness, and fulfillment. Yet the deeper truth is that many of the burdens people carry come not from life's difficulties themselves, but from their relentless attempt to control what was never theirs to control. The journey toward full surrender begins with an honest realization. We are not as powerful as we imagine. We cannot predict every outcome, prevent every disappointment, or guarantee every success. Despite our best efforts, life remains filled with uncertainties. Circumstances change without warning. Opportunities appear and disappear. Relationships evolve. Health can fluctuate. Plans can unravel in ways we never expected. For many people, this reality creates fear. They view uncertainty as an enemy. They spend enormous amounts of energy trying to protect themselves from every possible risk. They analyze every decision repeatedly, searching for guarantees that do not exist. Yet the more they attempt to secure complete control, the more anxious they often become. The reason is simple. Peace was never designed to come from control. Peace comes from trust. This truth is difficult for many people to accept because trust requires vulnerability. It requires admitting that there are limits to human understanding. It requires acknowledging that there are situations where personal effort alone is insufficient. Pride resists this idea because pride prefers independence. Pride wants to believe that success depends entirely upon personal strength and wisdom. The Holy Spirit works differently. He invites people into a relationship of dependence. Not dependence born from weakness, but dependence born from wisdom. A child trusts a loving parent not because the child lacks value, but because the parent possesses greater understanding and perspective. In the same way, spiritual surrender is rooted in the recognition that God's wisdom far exceeds human understanding. One of the hidden obstacles to surrender is the belief that if we release control, we will somehow lose ourselves. People fear that yielding to God's direction will diminish their dreams, restrict their freedom, or remove their individuality. Yet true surrender does not destroy identity. It refines it. It does not erase personality. It transforms character. It does not remove purpose. It reveals purpose. Imagine a musician attempting to play an instrument that has never been tuned properly. The instrument possesses potential, but its sound remains distorted. Surrender is much like allowing the Creator to tune the instrument. The purpose remains the same, but the harmony becomes clearer. The life becomes aligned with the design for which it was created. Many people misunderstand surrender because they focus on what they must give up rather than what they gain. They see surrender as losing control without realizing they are receiving guidance. They see it as sacrifice without recognizing the peace that follows. They see it as limitation without understanding the freedom it produces. The Holy Spirit often begins teaching surrender through small moments. Rarely does transformation happen through one dramatic event. More commonly, it develops through daily decisions. It appears when a person chooses faith over fear. It appears when someone obeys an inner conviction despite uncertainty. It appears when trust is exercised before complete understanding arrives. These small acts of surrender gradually reshape the heart. Over time, they create sensitivity to spiritual guidance. The individual begins to recognize that the Holy Spirit frequently speaks through gentle impressions, quiet convictions, and subtle promptings rather than overwhelming displays of power. Unfortunately, many people miss these moments because they are waiting for something dramatic. They expect thunder while ignoring whispers. They seek extraordinary signs while neglecting ordinary obedience. Yet spiritual maturity often grows through attention to small details. Another important aspect of surrender involves releasing personal timelines. One of the most common frustrations in life occurs when reality fails to align with expectations. People create schedules for success, healing, relationships, and achievements. When those schedules are disrupted, discouragement follows. The Holy Spirit often works according to a different timetable. Growth cannot always be rushed. Character requires development. Wisdom requires experience. Patience requires waiting. The lessons that shape a person's life are rarely learned instantly. This can feel uncomfortable because waiting challenges the desire for immediate results. Yet waiting often serves an important purpose. It teaches trust when visible progress is limited. It develops perseverance when circumstances remain unchanged. It strengthens faith when answers seem delayed. Those who surrender fully begin to understand that God's timing is not an obstacle to His purpose. His timing is often part of His purpose. Delays that seem frustrating in the moment may later reveal themselves as necessary preparation. Fear is another barrier that frequently prevents surrender. Fear tells people that if they let go, everything will fall apart. It whispers that trust is dangerous and obedience is risky. It magnifies uncertainty and minimizes faith. The Holy Spirit consistently moves people beyond fear, not by removing every challenge, but by providing confidence in the midst of challenges. Courage is not the absence of uncertainty. Courage is the decision to trust despite uncertainty. Many of the greatest moments of spiritual growth occur when people take steps of faith before they feel fully prepared. They choose obedience even when the outcome remains unclear. They move forward despite unanswered questions. In doing so, they discover that surrender often reveals strength they did not know they possessed. There is also a profound freedom that comes from releasing responsibility for outcomes. Human beings are responsible for obedience, effort, and faithfulness. They are not responsible for controlling every result. Much anxiety is created when people assume ownership of outcomes that ultimately remain beyond their control. The Holy Spirit invites believers to focus on faithfulness rather than control. This shift transforms the way challenges are viewed. Instead of obsessing over results, attention turns toward obedience. Instead of being consumed by uncertainty, energy is directed toward trust. As surrender deepens, something remarkable begins to happen. The heart becomes less troubled by circumstances. Fear loses some of its influence. Worry becomes less dominant. Confidence grows, not because life becomes easier, but because trust becomes stronger. The surrendered life discovers that peace is not found in knowing every answer. It is found in knowing the one who holds every answer. It realizes that true security does not come from controlling the future, but from trusting the one who already stands in the future. Gradually, the exhausting burden of self-reliance gives way to a deeper confidence, a quieter strength, and a more enduring peace that cannot be produced by human effort alone. One of the least understood realities of the spiritual life is that the Holy Spirit often speaks most clearly to a heart that is humble, teachable, and obedient. Many people spend years searching for extraordinary experiences, dramatic signs, or unmistakable revelations, while overlooking the condition of the heart through which spiritual guidance is most easily received. The secret is not found primarily in hearing a louder voice. It is found in becoming a more attentive listener. Human nature tends to complicate what is often simple. People assume that spiritual maturity is reserved for a select few who possess special abilities or unique gifts. They imagine that divine guidance belongs only to those who have reached an advanced level of faith. Yet the reality is much more accessible. The Holy Spirit delights in guiding those who are willing to learn, willing to listen, and willing to obey. Humility is where this journey begins. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself accurately. It is recognizing both your value and your limitations. It is understanding that while you possess abilities, knowledge, and experience, there remains a wisdom far greater than your own. Humility opens the door to spiritual growth because it creates a willingness to be taught. Pride, on the other hand, closes that door. Pride convinces people they already know enough. It resists correction, avoids accountability, and dismisses instruction. A proud heart often seeks confirmation of its own opinions rather than genuine guidance. It asks for direction while secretly hoping that direction aligns perfectly with its existing plans. The Holy Spirit works differently. His purpose is not merely to affirm personal preferences, but to transform lives. Transformation requires openness. It requires the willingness to admit that growth is needed and that change is possible. Many people struggle to hear spiritual guidance because they approach life with predetermined conclusions. They have already decided what they want, where they intend to go, and how they expect events to unfold. When divine wisdom points in a different direction, resistance emerges. The issue is rarely the absence of guidance. More often, it is the unwillingness to receive guidance that challenges personal desires. A teachable heart remains flexible. It understands that learning never truly ends. Regardless of age, experience, or accomplishments, there is always more wisdom to gain. This attitude creates an environment where the Holy Spirit can continue shaping character and refining perspective. One of the remarkable qualities of teachable people is that they view correction differently. Many individuals see correction as criticism. They interpret it as rejection or failure. Teachable people recognize correction as an opportunity for growth. They understand that every adjustment has the potential to move them closer to truth. The Holy Spirit often uses conviction as part of this process. Conviction is not condemnation. Condemnation pushes people toward shame and hopelessness. Conviction draws people toward transformation. It reveals areas where growth is needed, while simultaneously providing hope that change is possible. When a heart remains humble, conviction becomes a gift rather than a threat. Instead of becoming defensive, the individual becomes receptive. Instead of resisting change, they embrace it. Instead of protecting weaknesses, they allow those weaknesses to be strengthened. Another important aspect of spiritual sensitivity involves obedience. Many people desire greater guidance while neglecting the guidance they have already received. They ask for new direction while ignoring previous instruction. Yet spiritual growth often occurs through faithful obedience in small matters before greater responsibilities are entrusted. Imagine a student who refuses to complete basic lessons while demanding access to advanced material. The problem is not the availability of knowledge. The problem is the unwillingness to apply what has already been learned. In much the same way, obedience creates the foundation for deeper spiritual understanding. The Holy Spirit frequently leads one step at a time. He may not reveal every detail of the future, but he often provides enough direction for the next decision. Obedience in that decision prepares the heart for future guidance. Each act of faithfulness increases spiritual sensitivity Many people underestimate the significance of small acts of obedience. They assume that only major decisions matter, yet character is often formed through ordinary moments, choosing honesty when dishonesty would be easier, showing kindness when frustration feels justified, extending forgiveness when resentment seems natural, remaining faithful when immediate rewards are absent. These daily choices gradually shape the heart. They create habits of responsiveness that strengthen the relationship with the Holy Spirit. Over time, obedience becomes less about obligation and more about trust. Another challenge many people face is the constant noise of modern life. The world is filled with distractions, notifications, entertainment, responsibilities, ambitions, and endless streams of information compete for attention. In such an environment, it becomes difficult to recognize the gentle promptings of the Holy Spirit. Guidance often requires stillness, not merely physical stillness, but inner stillness. A quiet heart becomes more aware of subtle convictions and impressions. This does not mean withdrawing from responsibilities or avoiding activity. It means creating space for reflection, prayer, and spiritual attentiveness. The Holy Spirit often communicates through peace, wisdom, conviction, and discernment. These forms of guidance may not always be dramatic, but they are powerful. The challenge is learning to distinguish His voice from competing influences. Humility plays an important role here, because humble people are willing to test their assumptions rather than blindly trust every impulse. Teachable hearts ask questions. They seek wisdom. They remain open to correction. They examine motives honestly. This attitude protects against deception while increasing sensitivity to truth. Obedience also requires courage. There are moments when following spiritual guidance may not be popular or convenient. Others may not understand certain decisions. Opportunities may arise that appear attractive, but conflict with deeper convictions. In such situations, obedience demands trust. The Holy Spirit does not always lead people toward the easiest path. He leads them toward the best path. The easiest path often prioritizes comfort. The best path prioritizes growth, character, and purpose. Sometimes these paths overlap, but often they do not. Those who consistently follow spiritual guidance discover that obedience builds confidence. Each experience of faithfulness reinforces trust. Every step of obedience becomes evidence that the Holy Spirit's direction is reliable. Over time, fear loses influence because trust becomes stronger. Humility, teachability, and obedience work together in a remarkable way. Humility creates openness. Teachability creates growth. Obedience creates transformation. When these qualities are present, the heart becomes increasingly sensitive to spiritual guidance. The noise of pride begins to fade. The resistance of self-will weakens. The distractions that once dominated attention lose their power. A humble heart recognizes its need for guidance. A teachable heart welcomes wisdom. An obedient heart acts upon that wisdom. Together they create the kind of life through which the Holy Spirit can work most effectively, shaping thoughts, directing decisions, refining character, and leading a person into deeper truth, greater maturity, and a closer walk with God than they ever imagined possible. One of the most remarkable truths about the spiritual life is that full surrender does not lead to loss, but to transformation. Many people spend years resisting surrender because they fear what it might cost them. They imagine that yielding completely to the Holy Spirit will require giving up everything they value, every dream they hold, and every desire they possess. What they fail to realize is that surrender is not designed to diminish life. It is designed to elevate it. The Holy Spirit never seeks to destroy what is best within a person. He seeks to refine it, strengthen it, and align it with a greater purpose. The transformation that comes through surrender is often gradual rather than immediate. Human beings naturally prefer instant results. They want immediate answers, immediate growth, and immediate breakthroughs. Yet the deepest changes in life rarely happen overnight. Character develops through a process. Wisdom grows through experience. Spiritual maturity emerges through consistent trust and obedience over time. Consider how a tree grows. Day by day, the changes are almost invisible. A person looking at the tree each morning may see no difference at all. Yet after months and years, the growth becomes undeniable. The roots have deepened, the trunk has strengthened, the branches have expanded. The same principle applies to spiritual transformation. The Holy Spirit often works quietly beneath the surface, long before visible changes appear. Many people become discouraged because they expect dramatic progress in a short period of time. When they do not immediately see results, they assume nothing is happening. Yet some of the most important work takes place in hidden places. The Holy Spirit is often developing patience before producing visible success. He is cultivating humility before increasing influence. He is building character before expanding responsibility. One of the first signs of transformation is a change in perspective. Before surrender, people often view life primarily through the lens of personal ambition, personal comfort, and personal preferences. Their decisions are heavily influenced by fear, pride, comparison, and the desire for control. After surrender begins to deepen, a different perspective emerges. Instead of constantly asking, "What do I want?" a person begins asking, "What is right?" Instead of focusing only on immediate satisfaction, they begin considering eternal significance. Instead of measuring success solely by achievements, they begin valuing character, faithfulness, and spiritual growth. This shift in perspective changes everything. Circumstances that once created panic no longer hold the same power. Delays that once caused frustration become opportunities for trust. Challenges that once seemed unbearable become occasions for growth. The external situation may remain the same, but the internal response becomes dramatically different. Another powerful result of surrender is freedom. Many people do not realize how much of their lives are controlled by invisible chains. Fear controls decisions, worry dominates thoughts, pride influences behavior. The opinions of others determine actions. These burdens often become so familiar that people stop recognizing them as burdens at all. The Holy Spirit works to break those chains. He reveals areas where fear has replaced faith. He exposes unhealthy attachments. He challenges false beliefs. He invites people into a freedom they may never have experienced before. Freedom does not mean the absence of responsibility. It means liberation from unnecessary bondage. It means no longer being controlled by every emotion, every circumstance, or every opinion. It means discovering the ability to remain steady even when life becomes unstable. One of the greatest freedoms surrender produces is freedom from the need to prove yourself constantly. Many people spend their lives trying to earn acceptance, recognition, and approval. They believe their value depends upon performance. Success makes them feel significant. Failure makes them feel worthless. The Holy Spirit offers a different foundation. He reminds believers that their worth is not based upon achievements, but upon their identity in God. This truth creates tremendous freedom. A person no longer needs to chase validation from every source because they are anchored in something deeper and more secure. Peace is another extraordinary result of surrender. The world often defines peace as the absence of problems. According to this definition, Peace remains fragile because life always contains challenges. If peace depends entirely upon circumstances, it disappears whenever difficulties arise. The peace produced by the Holy Spirit is different. It exists even in the middle of uncertainty. It remains present during seasons of waiting. It survives disappointments and setbacks. This peace does not come from having every answer. It comes from trusting the one who possesses every answer. As surrender deepens, anxiety gradually loses its grip. This does not mean concerns vanish entirely. Rather, concerns no longer dominate the heart. Trust begins to occupy the space where worry once lived. Confidence grows where fear once ruled. Purpose also becomes clearer through surrender. Many people struggle with confusion because they are searching for purpose in the wrong places. They pursue success, popularity, possessions, or achievements, hoping these things will provide lasting fulfillment. While such pursuits may offer temporary satisfaction, they rarely answer the deeper questions of the soul. The Holy Spirit leads people toward a purpose that extends beyond personal ambition. He reveals opportunities to serve, influence, encourage, and make a meaningful difference. Purpose becomes less about self-promotion and more about contribution. It becomes less about building a personal kingdom and more about participating in something greater than oneself. One of the hidden secrets of surrender is that it often unlocks gifts and abilities that remain dormant for years. Fear may have prevented their use. Pride may have distorted their purpose. Insecurity may have hidden them entirely. As surrender increases, these gifts begin to emerge more clearly because they are no longer driven by selfish motives, but by a desire to serve. Transformation also affects relationships. A surrendered heart becomes more compassionate. It becomes slower to judge and quicker to forgive. It becomes more patient with imperfections because it recognizes its own need for grace. The Holy Spirit gradually replaces selfishness with love, bitterness with kindness, and resentment with forgiveness. These changes may seem small individually, but together they create profound transformation. The person who once lived in fear begins walking in confidence. The person who once sought control begins living in trust. The person who once chased approval begins resting in identity. The person who once felt lost begins living with purpose. The beautiful reality is that this transformation never truly ends. The Holy Spirit continually leads believers into deeper levels of freedom, greater measures of peace, and clearer understanding of purpose. Every act of surrender creates room for further growth. Every step of obedience opens new opportunities for transformation. Every moment of trust strengthens the relationship through which lasting change occurs, shaping a life that increasingly reflects wisdom, peace, freedom, and the divine purpose for which it was created.